Alright, welcome back to Mr. Berry Lectures. This is Chapter 14, Revolution and Nationalism, Section 4, Nationalism in India and Southwest Asia. It's the last section of notes for this chapter, so hopefully you guys have got these all filled in. But let's go ahead and begin. Alright, main idea for today's notes. We're going to kind of look at some empire building, or the beginning of some nations. Nationalism is triggered, or has triggered some independence movements to overthrow colonial powers. Especially in India and Southwest Asia, which we're going to talk about today. And why does this matter? Why are we talking about this today? Why do we, well, figuratively waste our time? We're not wasting our time, but why do we talk about it? The reason is that these independent nations, India, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, so on, they are all key players on the world stage today. And, obviously India is one of our greatest allies. We are talking to Iran constantly about their nuclear program. Saudi Arabia is someone we deal with on a daily basis for oil production, and Turkey's cool because my brother was just there. So if for no other reason, these are all coming about as new nations during this time of history, and we're in here. Alright, but first let's look at the Indian nationalism movement. So Indian nationalism grows, and there are two parties here. Now, by the mid-1800s, many Indians had actually begun to get their educations from the British, both in England and in India in British institutions, and they were beginning to pick up the ideas of nationalism and democracy. Many of these higher-class Indians are going to begin applying these political ideas to their own country, and to this end, two groups are formed to rid India of British rule. They'd seen and or lived in a country where there is no imperial rule. Some of them had lived in Britain. They had seen how that runs, and they felt that, why can't we run that kind of a system in India? So two groups form, and they are the Hindu Indian National Congress, which is formed in 1885, and the Muslim League, which is formed in 1906. There are some religious divisions between these two groups, of course. One is Hindu and one is Muslim, so differing opinions on religion. However, both are going to work towards the same basic goal, and that is Indian independence. All right. Now, World War I is really kind of the stepping off point for Indian independence. There are some efforts before the First World War to promote Indian independence. However, they don't get very far. And until World War I, the vast majority of Indians had little interest in nationalism. The situation had changed as over 1 million Indians enlisted in the British Army during World War I, and in return for their service, the British had actually promised some reforms that would eventually lead to self-government. In 1918, Indian troops returned home from the war, and they expected for Britain to fulfill this promise. Instead, however, they are once again treated as second-class citizens, and because of this, a lot of radical nationalists carried out acts of violence to show their hatred of British rule. These are things that we would probably today call acts of terrorism. They were bombing buildings with British officials. They were, in some case, lynching British police forces or military personnel. But there was intense and violent hatred of British rule at this point. I mean, when you are promised self-rule for your service in a war and then they don't give it to you, there are going to be a large amount of mad people. So I don't want to justify the actions of these violent protests. However, it is understandable on some level. Now, in order to curb this protest, and dissent for that matter, in 1919 the British are going to pass a set of laws called the Rowlatt Acts. And these laws allowed the government basically to jail protesters in India without trial for as long as 2 years. In the United States, that would be considered incredibly unconstitutional. We at least have to set a trial date. We don't necessarily have to go to trial immediately, but you can't be held without explanation or a trial being set for some point. The Rowlatt Acts are one of your vocab terms, and their laws passed in 1919 allow British, like I said, government to jail anti-British protesters without trial for as long as 2 years in India. Now, that is going to be important to us in a moment. But to Western educated Indians, the denial of trial by jury, other than just being harsh, violated their individual rights. So there is, or are, problems here that are going to arise. Now, one of the main ones who we're going to see actually kind of come out of this situation of the Rowlatt Acts is the Amritsar massacre. Now, in the spring of 1919, shortly after the Rowlatt Acts are put into place, something like 10,000 Hindus and Muslims go to a city of Amritsar in India to listen to speeches and pray about the issues of the Rowlatt Acts. In Amritsar around this time, there's a huge festival in an enclosed square, basically one entrance, and they intended to fast and pray and listen to political speeches. And a small group of nationalists were also at the scene. So there are demonstrations, especially the alliance of Hindus and Muslims, which alarm the British. There are some things going on there that are of concern to the British. Specifically, the British are alarmed by the size of the crowd. I mean, 10,000 people is a lot of people to be gathered in one place. I mean, that would be alarming to you even if you didn't think they were protesting your government necessarily. It is a large group of people. And they were also, of course, worried about these people who were actively arguing against their government. A military commander in the area at the time was also thinking that this crowd is ignoring a ban on public meetings. Part of the Rowlatt Acts actually bans public meetings like this, especially in these large numbers, and so he is going to have a problem. I should point out here that most people at this gathering were generally unaware that the British government had banned public meetings, and in fact, during this period of time there was actually, like I said, there were religious festivals, that kind of thing, various other meetings that were going on that really had nothing to do with the nationalist movement. So the fact that these people were here didn't necessarily indicate that they were nationalists or that they were in favor of protest against the British government. But the British are not aware of this, okay? So a military commander orders his troops at this point to go in and try to disperse the crowd. The crowd does not disperse, and so he orders his troops to fire on the crowd without warning. The troops shooting continues for 10 minutes, and because this is an enclosed courtyard, there is only one entrance, which happens that the British are standing in front of. They are unable to escape from the enclosed courtyard, and nearly 400 Indians die, and about 1,200 were wounded. And I should point out at this point that we're not talking about just a large group of men either. There are women and children in this crowd, and they are being fired at with high-powered military rifle without warning here. They are not given an opportunity much to leave. So this is a great loss of life on the part of the Indians at the hands of the British, and of course this is going to spark a lot of anger nationally in India. It is indeed a travesty of justice here. So I'm going to show you a clip here from the film Gandhi where they actually portray this event. So hold on one second.
England is so powerful. Its army and its navy, all its modern weapons. But when a great power like that strikes defenseless people, it shows its brutality, its own weakness, especially when those people do not strike back. Begs us to take the course of non-violence. fight back. We become the vandals and they become the law. If we bear their blows, they are the vandals. God and his law are on earth. We must have the courage to take their anger.
Hamilton, Major.
Should we issue a warning, sir?
They've had their warning. No meetings.
General Dyer, is it correct that you ordered your troops to fire at the thickest part of the crowd?
That is so.
$1,516 casualties with 1,650 bullets.
My intention was to inflict a lesson that would have an impact throughout all India.
General, had you been able to take in the armored car, would you have opened fire with the machine gun?
I think probably yes.
General, did you realize there were children and women in the crowd?
I did.
But that was irrelevant to the point you were making.
That is correct.
Could I ask you what provision you made for the wounded?
I was ready to help any who applied.
General, how does a child shot with a .303 Lee Enfield apply for help?